I'm Carter, 34 years old, and if you had asked me a year ago what I valued most in life, I would have said loyalty. Not money, not success, not even love. Loyalty. The kind of loyalty that isn't shaken by a bad day, a stupid joke, or a rough patch in a relationship. The kind that makes you feel safe when the world's on fire. Funny thing is, I used to think my wife, Hannah, believed in that kind of loyalty too. We'd been married 7 years. Not a fairy tale, but not a nightmare either. Just a regular, adult kind of love. Mortgage, weekend trips to IKEA, arguments over where to order takeout. We weren't the couple who plastered each other on Instagram or wrote anniversary essays that read like job applications, but we had our rhythm. She liked old movies, I liked woodworking. She couldn't cook to save her life. I burned everything but insisted on trying anyway. And it worked. Until it didn't. The shift didn't happen overnight. It never does. It crept in, casual and quiet, like a house settling on its foundation until the floor suddenly cracks. At first, it was just little remarks. We'd be out with friends, usually my best friend, Mason, and Hannah would joke about how lucky his girlfriend was. Mason and I had been tight since high school. He was charismatic, a little reckless, the kind of guy people gravitate toward without realizing it. Always had a new business idea, always a new story. I was the quieter one, planner, fixer, steady. We were a good balance, and Hannah used to say she liked that about us. That I grounded him, and he pushed me out of my comfort zone. But then came the first joke. We were at Mason's apartment for game night. His girlfriend, Tara, was out of town, so it was just the three of us. I beat them both in Settlers of Catan, rare win for me, and Hannah laughed and said, "Careful, Mason. If you keep being this much fun, I might just leave Carter for you." I froze. Mason chuckled awkwardly. I brushed it off with a weak smile, told myself it was just a dumb joke. And maybe it was. But something about it gnawed at me all the way home. I brought it up in the car. "Do you think that was funny?" I asked, keeping my voice light. "What? The Mason thing," she replied, laughing. "Relax, Carter. It was just a joke." "Yeah, I know. Just weird joke, don't you think?" She turned to me with this look, half amusement, half exasperation. "God, you're sensitive. It's not like I actually want to be with Mason. He's your best friend. That'd be disgusting." I dropped it. I told myself I was overthinking it. That maybe I was too sensitive. That she just had a dark sense of humor. I even apologized the next day for being weird about it. But then it happened again. And again. A few weeks later, we were at a barbecue with a group of friends. Hannah was holding a beer, Mason was grilling, and I was helping set up chairs. I came back with ice, just in time to hear her say, "If Mason ever makes a move, I'm not even sure I'd say no. You're way more fun than my husband." Everyone laughed. Even Mason, though I saw the look he gave me after. Guilt, confusion, a little fear. He knew it wasn't harmless anymore. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay next to her, staring at the ceiling, wondering what part of our marriage made it okay for her to humiliate me like that. Wondering when I became the punchline in my own relationship. I didn't bring it up that time. I just shut down a little. Went quieter. She noticed. "You've been acting weird lately," she said a few days later. "Is this still about that Mason joke?" "It's not just a joke if you keep saying it," I replied. She rolled her eyes. "Oh my God, Carter. You're being so dramatic. You know I love you, right? It's just teasing. That's how I flirt. That's my love language. Flirting. With my best friend. In front of me." I nodded. Not because I believed her, but because I was too tired to fight. I thought, maybe if I just waited it out, she'd stop. Maybe it was a phase. Or maybe I'd wake up and realize I was being paranoid. But it didn't stop. If anything, it escalated. She'd bring Mason up randomly at home. Mason would never forget to take the trash out. "You know, Mason's doing that new diet. Maybe you should try it too." I bet Mason wouldn't wear those shoes with those pants. I didn't tell Mason. I didn't want to ruin the friendship over something that might have been in my head. But it was getting harder to pretend it didn't bother me. And I could tell he was starting to feel it too. He got quieter around her, made excuses to leave early. The easy dynamic we used to have, gone. Then came the night that really broke me. We were hosting a small dinner. Just us, Mason, and one of Hannah's coworkers. Halfway through the meal, she made another joke. This time, she was tipsy, wine glass in hand, flush in the cheeks kind of tipsy. She looked at Mason, grinned, and said, "Seriously though, Mason, if you ever decide to steal me away, I'm just saying, Carter might not put up much of a fight." Everyone went quiet. Mason looked like he wanted to vanish into the floor. I laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that comes out when you're trying not to cry or scream. A breath. A reflex. I cleaned up early. Told them I had work in the morning. Hannah stayed out on the balcony with Mason and her coworker, still sipping her wine. I stood in the kitchen, hands shaking as I rinsed plates, listening to them laugh from the other room. That night, I didn't speak to her. I slept on the couch. She didn't come check on me. The next morning, she asked if I was mad again. I said no. She asked if I was going to pout all week. I said no. She asked if I was ever going to get over a stupid joke. I didn't respond, because by then, I wasn't sure it was a joke anymore, or if it ever had been. And for the first time, I started to wonder, what if she actually wanted him to make a move? What if this whole thing was her way of testing the waters? And what if I was just the fool too weak to call her bluff? I didn't answer her that morning. Instead, I opened a blank notepad file on my computer, and I started making a plan. Not a dramatic one, not some big explosion, just a quiet, calculated response. Because if she wanted to see what would happen if Mason ever made a move, then maybe it was time to call her on it. But not yet. Not until I had everything lined up. Not until she couldn't twist the story. Not until I was ready to watch her pack her bags. And not until I was sure she had nowhere to run when she did. Over the next few weeks, I operated like a ghost in my own home. I wasn't cold, exactly, just detached. Present enough to keep the peace. Absent enough to protect whatever sliver of dignity I had left. It's a strange thing, watching your marriage rot in slow motion. It doesn't fall apart with a bang. It decays, quietly, like fruit on the counter that no one throws away. And Hannah? She didn't notice. Or maybe she did, and just didn't care. Either way, she carried on like everything was fine. The jokes didn't stop. If anything, she got bolder. We were out to dinner one Friday. One of those forced date nights that couples do when they're trying to prove something. We sat across from each other at a trendy little tapas place downtown. I was halfway through chewing on some overpriced garlic shrimp when she looked up from her phone and said, "You know what Mason did yesterday? He brought lunch to his office for everyone. Isn't that sweet? You should do things like that." I didn't even flinch. "I work from home," I said calmly. "You're the only one here during the day." She laughed. "Exactly." I stared at her, trying to read her expression. Was she messing with me? Was this some elaborate, drawn-out bit I wasn't getting? But no. She was just smiling into her wine glass like it was the most normal thing in the world to compare your husband unfavorably to his best friend. Again. "I think you talk about Mason more than you talk about me," I said quietly. "Oh please," she scoffed, waving her hand. "You're being paranoid again. I live with you. That's enough talking." That one stung. I kept my mouth shut. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I was done saying it. I'd reached the point where arguing felt like screaming into a pillow. She'd already decided I was too sensitive, too boring, too predictable, a word she'd started using a lot lately. "You're not spontaneous anymore," she told me one night, curled up on the couch like she was giving me notes on a failed audition. "You used to surprise me. Now it's just grocery lists and laundry and, ugh, bills." I almost asked her what she wanted instead, but I already knew the answer. Mason. Or at least the fantasy of Mason. The version of him that didn't live in reality. The exciting, charismatic friend she only ever saw at parties or on his best behavior. She'd built him up in her head as this romantic alternative to the steady, loyal husband she'd apparently outgrown. And still I tried. I started going to the gym again. Cooked her favorite meals. Left little notes in her bag when she went to work. For a few days, she seemed to soften. There was one morning where she lingered in the doorway after grabbing her keys and kissed me on the cheek. "You're sweet," she said, like it surprised her. But it didn't last. It never does when respect is already gone. One Saturday afternoon, we had a small gathering at our place. Just Mason, a couple of mutual friends, and some neighbors. Hannah was in full hostess mode, laughing, refilling drinks, playing the social butterfly. I stayed mostly in the kitchen, handling the food, smiling when people walked by. It was easier that way. I was used to being in the background by now. Then, near the end of the evening, I heard my name. "Carter would never try something new like that," Hannah was saying. "He's safe." "You know." Laughter. I turned, standing frozen in the hallway just out of view. "I mean, it's kind of cute," she added. "Like having a golden retriever. You always know where he is, what he'll do. No surprises." He's dependable. More laughter. Mason didn't say anything. I could picture his face, that tight, uncomfortable smile he wore whenever Hannah pushed the line. I stepped outside onto the patio, letting the cold air sting my face. Something in me cracked that night. Not shattered, cracked. Like a hairline fracture in a windshield, small but fatal if ignored. The kind that spreads every time you hit a bump in the road. The next day, I confronted her. I heard what you said, I told her. She blinked, genuinely confused. What are you talking about? Last night. The golden retriever thing. Oh my God, she groaned, rolling her eyes. Again with this? It was a joke, Carter. Everyone laughed. Stop being so insecure. Insecure. I repeated, the word burning on my tongue. No, I'm just tired of being disrespected in my own home. She looked at me for a long moment, then shook her head. You know what your problem is? You want me to worship you. Like you're some perfect husband. But newsflash, you're not. I never said I was. No, but you act like I should be grateful just because you don't cheat, or gamble, or hit me. Like the bare minimum is supposed to earn you a medal. I don't want a medal, I said quietly. I just want a partner who doesn't flirt with my best friend in front of me. She didn't answer, just stood there, jaw clenched. We didn't speak for the rest of the day. That silence stretched into days. Then a week. Then came the betrayal that broke everything. It was a Tuesday. I remember because it was garbage day, and I'd just come back inside from wheeling the bin to the curb. My phone buzzed, a message from Mason. Hey, can we talk? It's important. I called him immediately. The tone in his message had me on edge. He sounded nervous. Listen, man, I didn't want to be the one to tell you this, but I think you need to know. My heart dropped. What happened? She texted me. Hannah? Yeah, a couple nights ago. I ignored it at first. Thought maybe she was drunk or something. But then she sent another message. And well, he trailed off. I didn't say anything. Just waited. She said if I was serious, she'd be willing to talk. About us. About what things might look like if we were together. I sat down on the edge of the bed, phone to my ear, everything around me going quiet. I never responded, he added quickly. I swear to you, Carter. I would never. I know, I cut in. And I did. Mason might have been reckless, but he wasn't cruel. I just thought you should know, he said. Because this isn't just jokes anymore. No, I whispered. It's not. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time. The air felt thick. The walls too close. I kept replaying the last year in my head. The teasing, the comparisons, the mockery. All of it suddenly recontextualized through one sickening realization. She'd been testing him. This entire time. Not just to flirt. Not just to humiliate me. But to see if he'd go for it. I walked into the living room, numb. Hannah was on the couch, scrolling through her phone. You talked to Mason lately? I asked. She looked up, surprised by my voice. Huh. I said, have you talked to him? She blinked. No? What? I studied her face. She was lying. I could see it in the way her eyes shifted left, the way she tucked her phone slightly out of view. No reason, I said. Then I turned, walked into the bedroom, and opened the closet. The duffel bags we used for weekend trips were stacked in the corner. I pulled one out, unzipped it, and started packing. I didn't do it fast. I wasn't yelling or storming or making a scene. I folded each shirt carefully, chose a pair of jeans, 2 pairs of socks, underwear, hoodie, toothbrush, charger. Hannah came in halfway through, confusion written across her face. What are you doing? I didn't answer. She stepped closer. Carter. I zipped the bag closed. You know what? I said, looking up at her for the first time in what felt like years. Let's stop pretending. You want to see if Mason will take you? Fine. Her eyes widened. What? Go ahead, I said, motioning toward the door. Let's see if he wants you as much as you think he does. She blinked, stunned. Are you serious? I handed her the bag. Dead serious. Her mouth opened, closed. Her face turned red, with shock, with anger, with whatever cocktail of emotions bubbles up when someone calls your bluff and you realize you weren't bluffing. I didn't mean it, she said. It was just. No, I interrupted. Don't say it was a joke. I walked past her, heart pounding but face calm. Years of quiet frustration had crystallized into something sharper, colder, resolute. I picked up my keys. Where are you going? She called after me. I don't know, I said. Anywhere that isn't here. And as I stepped outside, closing the door behind me, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. freedom. But this wasn't the end. Not even close. Because walking away was just the start. She thought this was about Mason. She had no idea what I'd been preparing. When I left that night, I didn't have a plan. Not a real one, anyway. The bag I packed was more symbolic than strategic. It held just enough to say, I'm done. No hotel reservation. No friend waiting with a spare bed. Just me, my car, and the unfamiliar hum of freedom whispering through the silence. I drove for hours without thinking, past familiar streets and closed convenience stores, until the city turned to trees and the traffic thinned to nothing. Around midnight, I pulled into an empty rest stop off the highway. Parked, shut off the engine, leaned back in the seat, and stared at the dark sky. It was the first time in years that no one expected anything from me. No calendar reminders. No dinner to cook. No birthday to remember. No snide remark to brace for. Just silence. And then, somewhere between the hum of crickets and the metallic creak of cooling car parts, I cried. Not loud. Not the dramatic sobs you see in movies. Just slow, quiet tears. The kind that slip out before you even know they've started. I don't know how long I sat like that. Maybe 20 minutes, maybe an hour. But when I finally wiped my face and looked at myself in the rearview mirror, I felt hollowed out. Not broken, just empty. Rock bottom doesn't always come with a crash. Sometimes it's a whisper. Eventually, I drove to a cheap roadside motel and paid cash for 2 nights. The clerk didn't ask questions, and I was grateful for that. The room smelled like cleaning solution and stale coffee, but the sheets were clean and the door locked. That was enough. For the first 24 hours, I did nothing. I slept, ate gas station snacks, watched some ancient crime documentary on a fuzzy TV, turned my phone on silent, and stuffed it in the drawer. I didn't want to see her name. Didn't want to see Mason's either, even though I knew he was probably panicking, wondering if I was okay. But mostly, I sat with the quiet. And it was awful. No matter how much people romanticize starting over, the truth is, it sucks in the beginning. You feel like a failure. You question every decision that led you here. You replay moments, the way she laughed with him, the look on her face when I handed her that bag, over and over, like some twisted highlight reel of your own humiliation. But slowly, and I mean slowly, the silence stopped feeling like punishment. It started to feel like space. On the 3rd day, I opened my laptop. I'd been self-employed for the last 5 years, doing freelance design and digital marketing. The kind of job that lets you work from anywhere, which up until that point had mostly meant working from my kitchen table while Hannah griped about noise levels or how much I charged clients. Now it meant freedom. I sent a few emails, reached out to old clients, updated my portfolio, booked a couple small projects to get cash flowing again. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave me something to do. A goal, however small. I checked into a longer-term Airbnb after that, a quiet studio above a garage about 40 minutes outside the city, owned by a retired couple who offered fresh eggs every Sunday and didn't ask questions. It was perfect, and for the first time in years, I began to breathe. Every morning, I made coffee on the little 2-burner stove and sat by the window, watching birds fight over a feeder. I got through client work before noon, then took long walks around the neighborhood. No headphones, no distractions. Just me, moving forward, one step at a time. I started writing again, too. Not for anyone, just private journaling. At first, it was venting. Ugly, bitter, raw paragraphs about betrayal and self-doubt. But over time, it changed. I started writing about what I wanted, not just what I'd lost. Peace, purpose, connection, maybe even love, the real kind. The kind that doesn't come with conditions or punchlines. Meanwhile, Hannah kept texting. First it was just, "Are you okay?" Then, "Where are you?" Followed by, "We need to talk." Then she got angry. "You're being immature. Running away doesn't fix anything. You're not the victim here, Carter." That one made me laugh out loud. Not bitterly, not cruelly, just a small, surprised laugh at the audacity of it all. Then the messages turned panicked. "Please come back. I miss you." I didn't mean it. I made a mistake. I didn't reply, not because I wanted to hurt her, but because I was still figuring out how to protect myself. Replying felt like stepping into a ring I wasn't ready to enter yet. Mason reached out too. His messages were simpler. Just checking in. "Hope you're okay. No pressure, but if you ever want to talk, I'm here." I replied to that one. Just 2 words. Appreciate it. And I did. I knew he was hurting too. stuck between loyalty and guilt, wondering if he could have done more, or less, or different. But I didn't blame him. This wasn't his fault. This was Hannah's choice. It took me a full month before I went back into the city. I had a meeting with a client at a cafe, and on a whim, I decided to swing by her neighborhood afterward. Driving those familiar streets felt strange, like visiting a past life. Our house looked the same from the outside. The hydrangeas I planted last spring were still blooming. The wind chime she hated was still hanging by the porch. For a second, I wondered if she was home. I almost parked, almost knocked on the door, but I didn't. I just watched, and then I drove away. That night, I journaled something I hadn't dared to write before. I'm starting to like who I am without her. And that terrified me, because for so long, my identity had been wrapped up in the role I played. The steady husband, the fixer, the golden retriever. It was scary to imagine that version of me might be gone for good, but also freeing. I started pushing my work harder, took on bigger clients, launched my own mini agency, hired a virtual assistant, set up a website that didn't just say freelancer, but owner. Suddenly, I wasn't just surviving. I was building. Around that time, I signed up for therapy. It wasn't easy. The first few sessions were mostly me rambling and trying not to sound pathetic. But my therapist, an older woman named Renee, had this calm, no-nonsense way of cutting through the fog. You spent a long time being the emotional sponge, she said in our third session. Absorbing everything, filtering it, cleaning up the mess. Now you're allowed to take up space, even if I don't know what to do with it. I asked. Especially then, she smiled. That's when you learn. Week by week, I started understanding just how much I'd been tolerating. Not just the jokes or the comparisons, but the emotional erosion. The way my needs had slowly been made to feel like demands. How I'd apologized for her behavior just to keep the peace. How I'd learned to laugh at things that hurt just to avoid being called too sensitive. And the more I saw it, the angrier I became. But it wasn't the explosive kind of anger. It was a slow burn. The kind that fuels change. One morning, about 2 months after I'd left, I got a voicemail from her. She sounded tired. Her voice cracked halfway through. Carter, I don't know what to say anymore. I didn't mean to push you away. I thought I was being funny. I thought it didn't bother you that much. But now you're gone and I don't know who I am without you. That last part hit me, because I didn't know who I was without her. I'd spent weeks finding out. And I wasn't ready to give that up just because she missed the version of me who tolerated being the punchline. Still, I didn't delete the message. I listened to it twice. Then I archived it. Later that week, Mason called. Not a text, a real call. I think she's spiraling, he said. I know. She showed up at my office yesterday. That made me sit up straighter. What? She said she wanted to talk. That she just needed closure. But it felt weird. Like she was trying to test if I still felt guilty. Do you? No, he said. I mean, I hate how things turned out. But I don't feel guilty. You deserve better. You always did. I didn't respond right away. Just let the silence hang for a moment. Then, thanks, man. After we hung up, I stared out the window for a long time. I knew what was coming. Hannah wasn't going to let go quietly. She wasn't the type. She didn't know how to sit with discomfort. She needed control. And when she couldn't guilt me or flirt her way out of it, I knew she'd try something else. But this time I was ready, because I wasn't the man who handed her that duffel bag anymore. I was someone new, and when the storm finally hit, I'd be the one holding the umbrella. By the time fall rolled in and the trees outside my Airbnb turned to fire-colored ghosts of themselves, I had changed more than I realized. I wasn't healed, not fully, but I was no longer that version of myself that stood in the kitchen, gripping a plate with white knuckles while Hannah told Mason she'd leave me for him if he ever made a move. That man was gone, and in his place stood someone colder, wiser, sharper around the edges, someone who'd stopped asking why she did it, and started asking what she thought she could get away with. Because the more I thought about it, the more something didn't add up. After Mason told me she'd messaged him, I assumed that was the worst of it, that it was about attention, power, control. But there were other cracks, too. Little details I'd overlooked during the emotional fog of our final months. Conversations that now, in hindsight, felt off. Like the time she casually mentioned that not everything we own is joint, then laughed and changed the subject. Or how she'd started insisting we use her card for groceries, even though we had a shared account. Or the way she always volunteered to do our taxes, something she never cared about before. I hadn't looked too closely then. I trusted her. And maybe that was the real mistake. So I made a list. A literal list, pen to paper, of everything I wanted to understand before I confronted her again. Not to patch things up, not to find closure, but to make sure that when I finally exposed her for what she really was, she wouldn't be able to spin it. Not to me, not to anyone. Here's what I wrote at the top of that list. If she used me, I'll let it slide. If she humiliated me, I'll let it go. But if she played me for a fool and tried to steal what I built, she's not walking away clean. I started with the finances. I logged into our shared account, the one where my freelance payments had gone for years. Nothing looked strange on the surface. She hadn't drained it or moved anything major. But when I checked the credit cards, I noticed something odd. A second account, one I'd never seen before. She'd applied for a new card under her name only, tied to her email, not ours, and had been slowly moving expenses there over the past year. Groceries, household supplies, car maintenance, stuff we used to split. Now, at first glance, that might not seem suspicious. But to someone like me, someone who'd spent the past few months dissecting every memory like an autopsy, it screamed setup. Because if I wasn't paying those bills anymore, then who was? Where was my money going? I pulled our last 6 months of statements from the joint account and realized I'd been the one covering the mortgage. Every month. On time. No issues. But hers? Her income, which she made decent money at a marketing agency, had vanished from the account almost entirely. Instead, she'd been redirecting her deposits to a second bank I didn't even know she had. I felt my jaw tighten. I wasn't just being ghosted from my own marriage. I was being phased out. She was setting the stage for a clean exit, one where she kept the house, kept her savings, and made it look like I had abandoned everything. And that's when the revenge stopped being emotional. It became tactical. I booked a meeting with a lawyer, someone referred to me by one of my new clients, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Jordan who specialized in high-asset divorces and messy exits, as she called them. I didn't tell her I wanted to file yet. I just asked for advice. She listened to my story, every bit of it, from the flirtation to the finances, and then sat back in her chair with a slow, knowing smile. She's not just trying to leave you, Jordan said. She's trying to win. What do you mean? She's positioning herself as the injured party, the abandoned wife. She'll say you ran off, left her to pay the bills, emotionally neglected her. And she'll back it up with credit card statements and pay stubs that show she handled everything while you went AWOL. My stomach turned. But she's the one who. Jordan held up a hand. I know. You know. But in court, it's about what you can prove. She leaned forward. So we're going to gather proof. Quietly. Thoroughly. And when we're ready, we hit back hard. Not out of spite. But because if you don't, she's going to rewrite this entire narrative to make you look like the villain. I nodded. Slowly. What do I need to do? And that's how the real setup began. First, Jordan helped me pull every financial document I could get my hands on. Bank statements, tax filings, credit history, savings accounts. We mapped out exactly where the money had gone for the last 2 years. Sure enough, Hannah had stashed away over $40,000 in a separate savings account, all while letting me foot the bills. Then we combed through communication. Old emails, texts, voice messages, screenshots from mutual friends. We built a digital timeline, a cold, clinical record of every snide remark, every flirtatious comment, every financial decision that made me look like the checked-out husband. And we countered it with receipts, deposits, work logs, proof that I wasn't absent. I was just being erased. And the best part? Mason agreed to help. He offered a signed affidavit confirming she'd reached out to him romantically while we were still married. He even forwarded the text, the one where she said, "If you're serious, I'm willing to talk." That one piece of evidence, it changed everything. She crossed a line. Mason told me one afternoon over coffee. I kept my mouth shut because I didn't want to make things worse. But now, I'm done letting her manipulate both of us. I nodded. Thanks. He paused. What are you going to do, Carter? Like, when this all comes out? I looked him dead in the eye. I'm going to make sure she can't lie her way out of it. Because here's the thing, I wasn't interested in some soap opera showdown. I didn't want to scream in a courtroom or throw her clothes on the lawn. That wasn't my style. But what I did want was clarity. I wanted the truth on record. I wanted to walk away with clean hands, clear eyes, and the satisfaction of knowing that this time, She'd underestimated the wrong man. So I waited. I let her keep texting, calling, leaving voice messages that swung wildly from apologetic to accusatory. At one point, she said, "You're acting like I cheated. I never even did anything." And I realized, to her, betrayal was only real if it left a physical trace. She didn't understand emotional cheating, manipulation, grooming a backup plan while standing on the ruins of a dying marriage. That's when I stopped feeling bad for her. Around Thanksgiving, she called me again. I didn't answer, but she left a long voicemail. "I think we should talk. Maybe even try counseling. We were good once, right? Doesn't that count for something?" I saved the message. Then I called Jordan. "I'm ready," I said. She didn't hesitate. "Let's get to work." What came next wasn't flashy. No dramatic confrontation. No public meltdown. Just documents. Strategy. Patience. We filed quietly. Had her served at work. Kept everything legal, tight, and precise. And when she tried to spin the story to her friends, I was already 3 steps ahead. Screenshots. Statements. A timeline that told the truth. And Mason? He was ready too. But the real fallout, the one I'd been planning for, that still hadn't hit yet. Because while Hannah thought I'd been hiding in some motel licking my wounds, I'd been rebuilding everything she tried to tear down. And when I revealed just how far I'd come, she was going to realize this wasn't a retreat. It was an ambush. The morning she was served, Hannah sent me 14 texts in a row. The first was a simple, "Are you serious?" By the 4th, she'd moved on to, "Wow, real mature. After everything I did for you." And by the 12th, "You'll regret this. I know things too, Carter." But the only thing she knew was how to bluff. And this time, I wasn't folding. The divorce filing wasn't just a packet of legal papers. It was a portfolio of truth. Every receipt, every diverted paycheck, every flirty message and silent manipulation. My lawyer, Jordan, had built it like a fortress, not out of anger, but precision. That was the key. No theatrics, just the quiet sound of a mask being peeled away. The filing included a statement of financial discrepancies showing how she rerouted over $40,000 to a private account. Mason's affidavit, confirming she initiated inappropriate contact while we were still married. Texts and voicemails demonstrating a long pattern of emotional degradation and manipulation. A proposal that she either sell the house and split the equity or buy me out at 60% to account for the fact that I paid the mortgage solo for over a year. And just to be thorough, we included a clause to protect my business, the agency I'd built from scratch while she was busy mocking my predictable life. Within 48 hours of being served, she called me. I didn't answer, so she called again, this time from a blocked number. Out of pure curiosity, and yes, a little pettiness, I picked up. "You've really changed," she said, skipping a greeting. I stayed silent. "You used to be so, what's the word, reasonable. You would have talked to me. You wouldn't have blindsided me like this." "I didn't blindside you, Hannah. You just never thought I'd grow a spine." There was a pause. Then, quietly, "So that's it." "That's it," I said. "Unless you want to drag it out and lose more." She scoffed. "I'm not the villain here, Carter." "No," I said. "You're just the one who made jokes about leaving your husband for his best friend, and meant it." Silence again. "I didn't cheat." "You did worse," I said. "You prepped for a future without me while I was still setting the dinner table for 2. She started to speak, maybe to defend herself, maybe to beg, but I hung up. And just like that, the door finally shut. The next few weeks moved fast. Her lawyer tried to posture at first, pushing back on the 60% equity share, questioning Mason's credibility, nitpicking transaction records. But Jordan dismantled every argument calmly, piece by piece. "Let them try," she told me. "They're playing checkers. We're playing chess." By December, we had a signed settlement. She bought me out of the house, but not at 60%. Jordan had uncovered that Hannah had used joint funds to upgrade the kitchen, with her own money, of course, and once that was factored in, we settled at 70%. She didn't fight it. She couldn't. Not when we had the receipts. She lost the narrative, and with it, the power. Mason and I met for drinks a few days after the paperwork was finalized. It was weird at first, not because I didn't trust him, but because there was still that ghost of old friendship hovering between us. A reminder of what we used to be before she drove a wedge through the center. He handed me a small envelope. Inside was a gift card to a high-end tool shop we used to dream about visiting back in our DIY days. You building anything new? He asked. Starting over, I said. Figured I'd build that right. We didn't talk about her much. He told me he was seeing someone new, someone outside our old circle. Kind, stable, drama-free. I learned a lot from all this, he admitted. Mostly about boundaries. Same, I said. Also about loyalty. He nodded. Thanks for not throwing me under the bus. You didn't drive it, I said. She did. We raised our glasses and toasted, not to revenge, but survival. To not letting someone else's chaos define us. The final fallout came 6 weeks later. A mutual friend, someone who had remained mostly neutral through the whole ordeal, reached out with an update. Apparently, Hannah had tried to spin the story to her social circle. She'd called me calculating, said I ambushed her with lawyers, painted herself as the poor wife who was blindsided by a midlife crisis. But then people saw the texts, heard the voicemails, got pieces of the timeline. Mason wasn't hiding anymore. And when the truth began to leak, the support she counted on evaporated. She's kind of alone now, the friend said. I didn't ask for more. I didn't gloat. Because the truth is, revenge wasn't about watching her suffer. It was about no longer suffering because of her. By the time spring rolled around, I had moved into a small cabin about 30 minutes from the city, quiet, rustic, perfect. I'd finished the design for my new website. The agency had grown to a team of 4. We even landed a national client. But more than any of that, I felt at peace. I cooked for one, but never felt lonely. I spent weekends hiking instead of second-guessing my worth. I made mistakes, sure. Healing isn't linear, but I stopped apologizing for asking to be treated with basic respect. One evening, I sat on the porch, warm mug in hand, the sun setting like fire behind the trees. A message buzzed on my phone. From a number I didn't recognize. I'm sorry. For everything. I didn't know what I had until I lost it. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I deleted it. Not out of spite, but because that chapter was closed. And as I sat there, watching the sky change colors, I realized something simple but powerful. Sometimes, the best revenge is living a life they no longer get to be part of. And I was finally doing exactly that.